Hi everybody, it's Alyce-Kay Ruckelshaus at Threshold of Hineni. Wow, I can't even say my own name. Um, it's been about 3 weeks since I've recorded any videos at all, and I'm sorry about that. It doesn't have to do with how I'm doing or anything like that. It's been just that I've been super busy. My parents were here for 2 months, which was so incredibly helpful, not just emotionally, but on a practical basis. And when we got to where it was like 2 weeks or maybe even 3 weeks from when they were going to have to leave, we just really buckled down. Well, first of all, my sister came for a visit, and then we just really buckled down on the things that needed to be done before they left. We had a whole list of things that we wanted to do to make the house more functional for me, having to handle things by myself and also having really limited mobility and a lot of physical pain. And 7 animals really to take care of: 3 cats, 2 dogs, and 2 feral cats that I feed. So we had a lot to do, and every few days we would redo our list to reflect, like, okay, what's the top priority, what absolutely has to be done. And our priorities changed a lot as the time got closer. So anyway, we were really busy, and then my parents left on Thursday. Today's Monday when I'm recording this. They left last Thursday, and the first day after they left was actually pretty good. I had to go do some grocery shopping. I did that, and I stayed really positive the whole day, and I really felt like, wow, okay, I think I can handle this. Then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday hit, and I was really depressed, which I kind of had expected, and my parents knew this too, that it's not because they left, it's because, I was finally getting some alone time to grieve. And and it's not that I set out to go, okay, today I'm going to grieve or anything, but it's just like, okay, you don't have the distraction of other people here and things that have to be done. I do have things that have to be done, like I need to get my taxes done, which I'm going to do today. Get that sent off to our CPA. It's late September, and so I really need to get that stuff to him. Yeah, it's not that I don't have anything to do, but it's like there's nobody here to distract me from grieving. And that's a good thing. It's like I really need to do that grief work. But it's not something that you can make happen. I don't know, maybe I could, but I don't know how. But anyway, so what I feel like I need to do is just be present for it. When I start feeling that grief, which usually happens after I look at Bill's picture, it's like, I look at his picture and I start thinking about him and thinking about him dying. Sometimes it's thinking about what he went through when he died, that really gets me down, and other times it's just not having him anymore. And so that's when it really hits me, I think, is when I look at his picture. But there are other times when it hits me too. And I don't know, I think there's a difference between grief and depression. I'm not really sure, but the last few days it was like I felt paralyzed. It's like I couldn't do anything. It was like I could hardly move. I did okay with teaching my classes, although they seemed like they lasted forever. But then it was like, there's stuff I need to do. There's stuff that usually I want to do. Usually I love making videos, and I just couldn't even get myself to make any. It was just really hard. And like I said, even though that's miserable and hard, I don't think that it's necessarily bad. I think that it's just part of grieving. And I think that I needed to go through that, and I needed to be very present for it, and not trying to distract myself or anything. One thing that has made a difference for me, and I can't say that it always takes away the depression or anything like that, but it helps me in focusing my trust on God well, let me back up just a little bit. One of the things that I realized, and I think I've thought of this a few times during the last few weeks, or even maybe over the last couple months since Bill died, is I think that since he died, sometimes I spend more time talking to him than I do talking to God. And again, you guys, you need to understand that the things that I say aren't necessarily, this is what I think is good. I'm often saying things by way of confession, and sometimes I forget to tell you that. So if I'm saying something that sounds bad, don't think, oh, I'm saying you should do it. I'm confessing this is what I'm going through because it's not always the right thing, you know. I don't feel like I'm 100% here. And even when I am 100% here, I can't always do the right thing. So, you know, I'm a human being. So anyway, so yeah, I realized, and I realized that particularly strongly when I was listening to, it's so hard for me to know what the order is to tell you guys this in. Okay, so one of the things that I often do for my devotions is I try to listen to or watch a sermon or a talk almost every day that will challenge me spiritually. Or not necessarily challenge, but help me spiritually. And one of the people I really love watching these days is Father Mike Smits. I'm not sure. Anyway, he's Catholic, obviously, Father. I'm not Catholic, but a lot of what he says is just really, really good. And anyway, there are several of his videos that I've watched a few times because they really speak to me and they challenge me to the point that I can't deal with it all in one day, and I don't want to forget. As I've gotten older, I guess it's quality versus quantity. I don't feel like I need to do something new every day. I feel like I need to stay in that one place until I've really milked it or learned what I need to learn from it, like a sermon or something. Like right now, I'm listening to a sermon that I've listened to actually a few times by Tim Keller, and I'll try to remember to post these things in the description below. And if I don't, and you want to know it, then remind me in the comments. But anyway, so this sermon by Tim Keller, I listened to it all the way through the very first time a few months ago. It was before Bill died. But since then, it's like I've been listening to it. I listened to it for a little bit, and then when I get to something that just really strikes me, that's where I stop. And, you know, and I pray about it and think about it. And so like yesterday for my devotions, I was listening to that, and I listened maybe to 2 minutes of the sermon. And I listened already to the introduction the day before yesterday and journaled on it and everything. But I got to this one point that just really, really struck me. And it had struck me before Bill died too, but in a completely different way now. And so this is how my devotions often go, is that I will listen to something like that, or maybe read the Bible first. But lately, because it's so hard for me to think, listening to somebody else talk really helps me. And so I'll listen to a little bit of a sermon. So like yesterday, 2 or 3 minutes of the sermon. And that was like, wow, I really need to deal with this. And so instead of journaling in my journal yesterday, I journaled on Facebook, which I do sometimes, but I just really felt like God was saying that I should share this on Facebook, what I was going through at that time, which was a struggle. And also, you know, to kind of show people how another way of having devotions. I mean, there's so many ways that you can have your devotions because we're all individual people. And I've never heard of anybody else doing their devotions this way. But one thing I've learned in this world is that I'm not the only one for anything. So somebody else probably has. So anyway, so then, so I journaled about that. And then God took me to different songs, which, you know, I use YouTube for finding these different songs, and I just spent time worshiping and everything. And it was kind of funny because what Timothy Keller was talking about was a quest, and how a quest changes you, and how you don't just go on a quest, you have to be called onto a quest. And it's a huge life change, and that's exactly, you know, God's calling me to live this life now without Bill. And he has things that he wants me to do, some of which I kind of know, but I don't know what exactly the steps are and everything. And that's the thing about a quest too, is that often you don't know, okay, this is my long-term goal or anything. It's just, you just have to step out and follow God. He was talking specifically about Abraham. God called him out of where his family had moved to from Ur of the Chaldeans, and God called Abraham, and he didn't tell him what he was going to do or exactly where or anything like that, but Abraham followed. And and this is what I've been struggling with, and I'm still kind of struggling, but I'm getting better. I'm getting there. I'm struggling with saying yes to what God has put on my plate, and that's one of the things from Father Mike Schmitz too, in his talk about taking up your cross. I think it's called How to Take Up Your Cross, but like I said, I'll put it in the description below. Anyway, he talks about saying yes to the things that we didn't choose, but that are in our life. And he doesn't mean that in a fatalistic sense. Like if you're in an abusive situation or you're in a really bad job or whatever. If you're in a really bad situation, he's not saying by saying yes that you're saying, okay, I'm gonna stay in this situation. I'm gonna continue to be abused or whatever it is. But he's saying, say yes to engaging with it. And so the situation that I'm in is that I'm living, I'm still here on earth. I didn't die with Bill in the accident. And so I'm still here, and God has chosen to have me still be here, but without Bill. And I can't change that. There's nothing I can do to change that. I mean, I suppose I could get remarried, but I don't want to get remarried. Oh gosh, there's so many reasons I don't want to get remarried. One of them is that it would not be fair to any man because Bill was so perfect, but also just, I don't feel like it. Bill was the one, and I just, it doesn't even appeal to me. So there's nothing I can do to change this situation. But I can choose whether I'm going to engage in it or not. I can just barely put up with it and mope around and not accomplish what God wants me to accomplish, or I can engage with it, which means right now going through the grieving, and it means walking and doing the things that God calls me to do day by day, whether I feel like it or not, and even engaging with the fact that I don't feel like it, like yesterday. So saying yes to that is, that's my challenge right now. That's not my quest. I'm saying yes to the quest. So yesterday was kind of dealing with that, in my devotions. And then, because whenever I think of the word quest, I was kind of raised on Man of La Mancha. My parents were one of 3 couples who formed a marriage ministry, and the Man of La Mancha was kind of the theme for at least one of their talks, and how he saw Dulcinea as who she really was, not who she even saw herself as, but who she really was, as precious and beautiful and completely different from what other people thought of her. And anyway, so whenever I think of the word quest, I think of Man of La Mancha, because Don Quixote de la Mancha was on this quest, and it really did change his life, and it changed the life of so many other people too. And and he was like a crazy person, but he really touched people. And so anyway, so I went to the song The Impossible Dream. First of all, I watched that from part of the movie, and that was just really meaningful. There were things in there that touched me that I had never noticed before Bill died. I love that musical. I've watched it many, many times. I didn't watch it at all during our marriage because Bill really hated musicals. So occasionally I would watch one by myself, but Man of La Mancha would have been one that I would have wanted to watch together. And, there were things that I just wept through that song because it was like Sophia Loren, who played Dulcinea. It was like she had just finally come to see herself as the person that Don Quixote saw her as. And then I watched it just YouTube took me straight into The Impossible Dream, the song sung by Gomer Pyle. Yeah, well, by what's his name? Anyway, as Gomer Pyle. And the beginning was just really beautiful and again really challenging before he even got to the song. And yeah, so from there, which sometimes God does take me to secular stuff like that, because he speaks to me through it. And then from there, he took me to different songs, and I can't remember the exact songs that he took me to, but they were worship songs. And so I just spent that time worshiping and singing those songs to God. And he always moves in my heart through them. Sometimes he shows me things through those songs that I hadn't seen in them before, or reaffirming something to him or whatever. And then he took me to a passage of scripture, which I read and thought about, and then a couple more songs. So anyway, I'll try to link that for you so that you can see it, because I know I've done a horrible job describing it. But it's kind of typical for me, for my devotion times, is this whole thing of listening to a talk and then, moving on kind of based on that theme. But it's like, God taking me to different songs and stuff. I mean, I really believe he puts the next song in my heart. And it's like, it's kind of like a mini retreat for me. And so anyway, I'll share a link to that. If I can't share the exact link, then you just have to go to my Facebook page, for that. Anyway, so I guess what I'm saying too is that I was in a really, really bad place at the beginning, just really depressed. And by the time that I had worked that through, I can't say that I was like, oh, yay, I'm so glad to live this life or anything like that. I was still, I think I've been depressed since Bill died. I mean, it's like, not just depressed like sad, but depressed like food doesn't taste as good. Things that I normally enjoy just don't do it. There's just, I feel like there's very little that brings me joy these days, and I think I just have to get through it. But by the end of that, I had kind of resolved what I was dealing with that day. That doesn't mean that it's resolved completely. It just means it was resolved for that day. And I was back in a place, at least, of having my focus on the Lord and trusting him and reaffirming my trust for him. And that's a big thing. I think that, for me, that was in the evening, and my day would have been completely different if I had done that in the morning. Sundays for me are just, I spend a lot of time sleeping because my job is just really exhausting and my work schedule doesn't allow me a lot of sleep. So for me, oh gosh, you guys, I'm sorry. I'm like losing my train of thought. So for me, it was kind of like in the Psalms. I should have found one of the Psalms that does this before I got on today, but I didn't think about it. In the Psalms, a lot of times David, or the psalm writer, is really struggling and can't understand things. And by the end of the psalm, they don't necessarily understand why or the question that they were asking at the beginning of the psalm, but they've come to a place where they're really genuinely worshiping God and trusting him. And that's what my devotions do for me. And I just wanted to share that because I think that when you're grieving, it's so hard. For one thing, you're just out of your normal pattern. So even if like devotions were part of your routine, it's just you're out of that routine now. And I'm sorry, I needed to put some hand lotion on. But also you need something different from your devotions that you've probably not really had in the past. And that time of worship, I think that's the most important part for me, is the worship and being in God's word and having somebody else teach me and speak to me, is why I go to those talks. That is crucial for getting through this. It is, I have to constantly have my eyes turned back to God, turned back to God, turned back to God, because that's not my natural state right now. My natural state right now is to be focused on Bill, on my loss. And that is huge, yes. And I'm not trying to ignore that, but that's not where my focus should be. That's not, if my focus is on God, then I'm able to engage with the depression, the sadness, the loneliness, the whatever, the missing Bill. That's the huge thing. I'm able to focus on those things, but it's different because I'm not doing it by myself. I'm doing it with God. And it's not that God hasn't been there otherwise. It's that He's a gentleman. I have to invite Him into the process. He's there with me. He's grieving with me, because it's not because He's grieving over Bill, but because He's grieving that I'm hurting so much. But it's like I have to invite Him into that process with me. And when He's there with me, it's a completely different thing. I may still be really sad and I may be really, really hurting, but I'm not by myself. And I have His strength. That's really the thing, is that I have His strength. And I think also just having your priorities right. We are made to worship God. That's the end point of man, is to worship God and to enjoy Him forever. And so when my focus is not on God, it's on missing Bill, and that's my sole focus is missing Bill, I'm not fulfilling my purpose. And so that's where I get paralyzed, I think. So one of the things that had struck me, going back to what I was saying earlier, and I'm sorry this is so disjointed. As you know, I don't plan these videos. I just say what's on my heart. It was kind of funny because I don't even know why I watched this video, but Father Mike Schmitz had a video about, do pets go to heaven? And one of the things that he said at the end was that a lot of people say, well, if you need your dog in heaven in order for you to be happy in heaven, then I'm sure God's going to have your dog there. And he wasn't really arguing with that. He wasn't arguing about whether or not pets are in heaven. But his point, at least for me at the end, was if you need to have your dog in heaven in order for you to be happy in heaven, you're not ready for heaven. He wasn't saying you're not saved. He was just saying you're not ready for heaven, because heaven isn't about being happy because your dog's there. Heaven is about worshiping God, and it's about being fully alive to Him and turned towards Him. And I don't know, there was just like, I don't know if that means anything to you all, but to me, I guess it was just like where I was at the time, kind of where I still am at that time. And that was like, whoa, that was where I really, really realized, and I think I'd realized this before, but I really realized the impact or whatever, or the meaning of the fact that I was spending more time talking to Bill after he died than I was talking to God. And it's okay for me to talk to Bill. It's okay for me to talk to Bill a lot. But God needs to be my focus. And it's like idolizing Bill. And I have to be really careful of that. And I'm sure that's a common thing. When somebody dies, and especially somebody that you really loved, and maybe I was even idolizing him before he died, because I loved him so much. I really did. And I know he loved me a lot too. I mean, we loved each other so much, and we just had an amazing marriage, more than I could ever have dreamt of. And yeah, so it's like I needed to get my focus back on God. I need to talk to God more than I talk to my dead husband. And I don't even know, guys, everybody wants to say, yeah, he hears you, he's watching you, he's there for you. I don't know, you guys, don't you think he has something better to do in heaven? I mean, yeah, I know there's the great cloud of witnesses, so I'm pretty sure he sees me some of the time. But I don't think that he's here watching me 24/7, and he's not omnipresent like God. It's like hopefully he's spending a lot of time worshiping God, because that's the thing that should really bring him joy in heaven, not watching me and talking to me and watching me cry and everything else. You know, so anyway, yeah, I'm not gonna. Anyway, sorry if that burst anybody's bubble, but seriously, you guys. um, so yeah, it's like I need to turn my eyes more on Jesus. I need to turn my eyes on God, and when I do, like I said, it doesn't mean that I'm not depressed anymore. It doesn't mean that I'm not sad. It's just different. There's a different quality to it that I can't really explain. And anyway, so yeah, so that really spoke to me, where he said, you're not ready for heaven, which I think a lot of times God takes us when we're not ready. But you're not really, and I know the Catholics believe in purgatory, and I think that's basically what he was saying is, you're going to spend time in purgatory getting ready for heaven, which I don't see that in the Bible, so I don't believe that. But his point was still good, and his point was still important to me, that it's like I want to be ready for heaven. I want to be so focused on the Lord that when I get to heaven, it's just a continuation of what I've already been doing here on earth, but just closer. It's like here we see in a glass darkly, but there we shall see face to face. And yeah, so I don't have a way of wrapping this up. Sorry. That's it. That's all that I wanted to say, was it's really important to have your devotions, and you don't need to have your devotions the same way I do, but spend that time with the Lord. It's really, really important, and it makes a big difference. It makes it bearable, and it gives you the strength to deal with all this. Okay, I love you all. I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.